Yo, 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 and welcome back to Creeps and Crimes
Podcast.
I'm Taylor.
I'm Morgan. Happy
Whatever day this is.
and happy bonus app.
And happy bonus app.
Part 2.
Happy part 2 early.
Happy birthday week.
Happy birthday week to me. This is my first of many gifts. Not really many. It's like one is actually mine and another one is in honor of me. But you'll find out about that on Thursday in 196. But this is the first of a few gifts that you're going to be getting from me for my birthday. And that is that I'm giving you, Patreon gets this episode early, like literally Friday, if I am a good girl.
Google.
Which I might not be a good girl.
Yeah.
Because it is birthday week.
And
the boys out of town. So you know.
Well,
I'm
I'm
not
talking like movie.
Chicken Caesar salad. Poughkeepsie.
Boys are out of town.
Wait, sit on it. Anyways, so I not forced Morgan. Morgan actually very happily agreed. I don't know if she would argue mainly because it was my birthday or because it's actually pretty. Well, you're not gonna argue with it.
Well, and it was like it didn't bother me because I wasn't doing anything more.
Either
it's not
way,
like we were
it's the
recording
same
an extra thing. Yeah.
In fact, I gave myself another set of notes.
Yeah. So
I actually fucked myself.
You actually really fucked yourself.
I actually did fuck myself. I was like, you know what I could do over this little birthday weekend leading to my birthday, having a great time because it's my birthday.
Just
Relax. No, bitch. I want to do something crazy for my birthday. And I've been thinking about it, but I need to talk to you. I have 4 ideas. Okay. So we'll come back to that. But what we're here for, what we all came for, is that I'm going to give you part 2. And I didn't realize, I read that my case in 195 so fast. Like yours was the majority of the episode, just so you know. That's a first ever.
I'm so sorry because it was terrible.
That is the first time ever in history. And maybe, I don't know how I read at the speed of light that I did, because if I would have been, and the reason I read that fast, and normally I can't do it. Normally, the second I know that there's pressure, I can't read. But Morgan had to get to her appointment. She was so stressed out about it. And I just wanted it to be over so you could get off camera and be stressed about it in private.
And I'll talk about that on last week's Pipe and Hot Gauze.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it'll be on Pipe and Hot Gauze. We're going to have a whole conversation about it.
yeah.
So, anyways, I kind of sped through it. So it ended up being a lot at once and then just like a drop off. And the few DMs, because we're recording this on the morning that episode came out. The few DMs I've gotten about it this morning is like, are you fucking joking? Like, fuck you. But it's my birthday.
It's literally her birthday.
It's literally my birthday. So you guys will probably be getting this on Tuesday, maybe Monday if I'm feeling absolutely fucking crazy. But we'll see. We'll see what Patreon wants. We'll let them decide.
What are you doing this weekend?
Oh, nothing.
You might be bored. You'll get it out.
Yeah, I probably will. Knowing me. What I really want to do is I want to
something in the backyard.
live in my garden.
I knew it.
I just want to be in my garden. I did get a chainsaw. I did get my hands on not a chainsaw. It's my chainsaw. I just left it in. It's mine and Logan's chainsaw.
Well, if you're bored, swing on by.
I was thinking about it.
And just go
mainly
crazy.
because I need Aaron to show me how to start it. Because once that's done,
you're good.
Goodbye.
Just pull it, right? Is it like a...
No, it's like a... So what I have to do, guys... Well, yeah, that. You just pull it. But it's mainly what I need to do with the chainsaw. I don't know that. I'll figure that out sooner or later.
Yeah, I don't actually want you using a chainsaw by yourself.
Yeah, that's why I was going to call someone to come be here when I do use it. Because the tree is about 13 feet.
That you can wait till Monday.
No, I could do it. I can 100%. And mainly because Logan was like, do not do this. And I have to do it now. You just shouldn't have brought it up. So
you're going to have to dig it out of the ground though, right?
Well, so here's the thing. It's really tiny, but the thing is it's a big oak tree and it's in not only right underneath the power lines, but it's in this really weird spot in my yard. And you guys know I'm a tree lover. I don't like to, but literally the electricians came by when I was in my garden. They're like, by the way, you might want to consider taking this out sooner rather than later. It will fall on your house. And I was like, oh my God. I'll get it out right now. But
Are
plus
they gonna
it's
let
shading
you?
yes. It's not touching it yet.
No, I mean, is the society going to let you?
It's a new tree.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was clearly done by a fucking squirrel because the place it's in is incredibly inconvenient.
Okay.
Yeah, so it wasn't on purpose. It wasn't anything like that. So anyways, they want me to, the electrician said that I should get it out. That was my golden ticket. Because I wanted it gone either way. It fucks up the shade in my garden. And if it's gone, I can have another raised bed. which is the end goal here. And if I do it fast enough,
You can do it.
I can do it right now. I could still plant right now. And I would like to do lots.
Okay.
Before anyone comes at me, I did try to find people that come and dig it up and go replant it, but it's too big now. So they can't. It like has like a 0.5% chance of being able to like survive. So in exchange, I will go plant another tree. I promise. I swear to God.
Somewhere.
I'll find it. And not in my yard though. Actually, I would like to plant like 30 of those tall skinny trees to give me some privacy. So in exchange, one tree, 30. What about that? That sounds like a good exchange.
Yeah.
And I'll plant hedges. Fucking no one. Look,
I'm replacing the oxygen.
in fact, I'm going to make my yard oxygen sustainable.
There you go.
That's all that we could ask for.
Hedges would look so good.
The hedges. After seeing it in that 1901 creepy ass photo, I have to do it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to hop back into the case.
Sad case, but I'm excited.
Really sad case, but we're really excited to be able to hear what really happened because what we got
Cliffhanger.
was a cliffhanger. I'm not going to lie. I have no idea how many pages this is. So we're just going to rock and roll with it. And I'm going to give you guys a little refresher just in case you forgot. And by the way, I figured out I think I found the proper pronunciation. I was saying it semi-right, but it's Duperrault. Duperrault.
Duperrault.
So I have to add in that Duperrault.
Atlantis.
So Duperrault.
That's Atlantis.
Atlantis. Yep. So the Duperrault family of 5 consisted of Arthur, Jean, Brian, Terry Jo, and Renee, with the final 3, Brian, Terry Jo, and Renee being the children. They charter the ketch called the Bluebelle to take them from Fort Lauderdale all around the Bahamas for a week in November of 1961. So they hire Julian Harvey as the skipper of the Bluebelle and his new wife, Mary Dean Harvey, to come along with them as the cook of the ketch. The trip was wonderful, magical, and everything that Arthur ever wanted to show his family about the Caribbean. Until the night of November 12th, when, according to Julian Harvey, an intense squall hit the Bluebelle out of nowhere, turning it on its side, then back upright, crashing the mast, starting a fire, and sinking the Bluebelle in the dead of night. Julian Harvey believed that he was the only survivor when he was rescued the following afternoon from floating in a dinghy in the Northwest Providence Channel by the Gulf Lion, with the lifeless body of 7-year-old Renee Duperrault. But he was wrong, because 4 days later, after the tragedy, on November 16th, 1961, 11-year-old Terry Jo was discovered clinging onto a small cork float by the crew of the Greek freighter Captain Theo and rushed to a Miami hospital via rescue helicopter. Terry Jo was severely sunburned, dehydrated, disoriented, and fighting for her life. For 2 days, while in critical condition, being treated, she was unable to speak. Investigators waited anxiously to hear her side of the story because within hours of her rescue, Julian Harvey took his own life in a Miami motel under a fake name. Why? Investigators believed that whatever Terry Jo would soon tell them would be the answer to that question, as they were already a bit suspicious about the skipper. However, there was a strong pushback from all of those who knew and loved Julian Harvey about him having any fault. They believed that Harvey's suicide was not the result of him trying to escape anything more than just his own horrific luck. So like I said in the last episode, as they waited for Terry Jo to speak, investigators began digging into Harvey's past, and that is when they learn about him through interviews with friends and family members. So, new section. According to the book Alone, Orphaned on the Ocean, there is not much really known about Julian Harvey's early life, but what we do know is that he was born in New York County, New York on March 1st, 1917. His parents divorced when he was only 1 year old, and he lived alone with his mother until she remarried to a very well-known vaudeville producer when he was just 6 years old. And his stepfather was a great man that really loved Julian as his own and gave him his love for sailing because he gifted him like a whole ass sailboat at 10 years old.
Goals.
However, the vaudeville money went dry with the crash of Hollywood and the Depression, making his mother and stepfather so impoverished that they could no longer afford to raise him. Therefore, he was sent to live with his well-off aunt and uncle in New York at the age of 13. Thankfully, they were amazing parents to Julian, loving him like he was their own. And in high school, he was known as this like pretty boy, strong, charming, gorgeous, sweet. He was a skilled athlete in boxing and gymnastics, but he was also known to be a bit of a show off, which is how he scored his first wife, because they married while they were in high school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So unsurprisingly, this marriage did
Both
not
of them in high
last.
school.
Yeah. And it was annulled within the year. Julian Harvey graduated from Great Neck High School in Long Island, New York in 1937. He then worked as a model for the John Robert Powers Agency before enrolling in the University of North Carolina, majoring in engineering in 1939. But his second year, he transferred to Purdue. Now, with the general public's knowledge that any day now the U.S. was going to join World War II, wanting to avoid being drafted and being able to actually be trained, not just been tossed into combat with very little training, Harvey decided to leave his college career after 2 years and enlist in the Army Air Corps in August of 1941. Side note, he's technically was in the Air Force, but the Air Force didn't exist until after World War II.
So I didn't know that if you were to enlist before the draft, you actually got real training.
That's what Logan said. That's what Logan's always said. Logan's like, if we're ever go to war, I immediately am stopping what I'm doing. I'm going and enlisting, because then you get to go through basic and everything, and they want to give you a specialty, and they take the time to make you prepared.
Yeah.
But if you get drafted, you go to a really basic training, because it's panicked, and then you're going.
Whoa. Yeah. I didn't know that.
Air Force didn't exist until after World War II, so technically it was the Army Air Corps. According to the American Air Museum, Harvey flew a total of 29 combat missions with the 93rd Bomb Group in World War II. In 1946 or 47, the reports differ on this, Harvey was assigned to administrative work in the Pentagon before given permission to go back to Purdue and finish his degree as an active Air Force officer. Graduated in 1948 with his bachelor's degree in aeronautic engineering, during which the now 31-year-old met and married his second or third wife. I think there was one before her, so I'm going to go ahead and just say third wife from the research I've done since I typed this, 21-year-old Joan, and by the end of that year, they welcomed his first and only son, Lance, into the world. At some point in the same year, Harvey was transferred to the England Air Force Base on the Florida Panhandle, which is Pensacola, which is where I was, moving Joan, Lance, and I believe Joan's mother with them all down there to live on base. However, tragedy struck on April 21st, 1949, when Joan, her mother, and Harvey were driving back to base from seeing a movie in town on this super rainy, windy night going about 40 miles an hour. And the car just randomly fishtailed while going over a bridge, and it shoved them over the bridge and into this deep bayou. The car rolled off over the railing, busted through it, and it submerged itself in 20-foot deep water, sinking within seconds. Thinking quickly, because he's an ejection specialist, Harvey was able to quickly open his door while the car was falling off the bridge and jump out, because that's what he was trained to do, that quick thinking. But unfortunately, though, his beloved wife and her mother could not make it out, and he tried to go save them, but was unsuccessful. Now, this was horrific.
Traumatic.
Awful. His only son now doesn't have a mom, and it's just him and his son. So terrible. He had a big choice to make, how can I continue to take care of my son? So he has to basically pull himself together with the tactics that he learned from being in World War II and continue on to be strong in the military to be able to make money for his son. So in 1950, he was transferred to the Air Force Base, to an Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas, where he then married his fourth wife named Jitty. And just 3 months after their marriage, he was then sent to Korea to fly Sabre, I think is how you say it, Sabre jets, returning 2 years later after flying 114 combat missions in Korea. Upon his return in 1953, his fourth wife divorced him on grounds of now incompatibility, and he was transferred to D.C., where he worked as a staff officer for the Pentagon. There he met and married his fifth wife, Georgiana, and in 1954, he and his new wife purchased a 68-foot yawl, which is a type of sailboat, named Torbatros. They called it Torby. Thank God, because I couldn't say that a million times. But within a year, the Torby actually sank after they were on this, they were just sailing around having fun, and they accidentally wrecked into a shipwreck of World War I battleship, the Texas, in Chesapeake Bay, because it wasn't properly marked.
The fuck?
Yeah. Julian and his wife were devastated about this, but thankfully everyone made it off safely and alive. And Harvey then sued the federal government because it was a warship, fucking up his ship and sinking his because they didn't have it marked properly. And he won a settlement of $14,258 on top of the insurance money that he had taken out on the Torby. It wasn't long after this that Harvey was sent back to the England Air Force Base in Pensacola as a deputy commander of the 3,243rd Fighter Test Group, where he began his test flights on the new F-86H Sabres. And on one of his very first flights in January of 1957, he had to eject, injuring his shoulder like badly because the engine just shit out and he had to get out. It was a test plane. So
that's one job that you would never have me do.
That was one.
Planes.
I won't even be. Don't ask me to fly one.
Don't even put me near.
Don't put me on the air ever. Put me on the air as in the mic.
I mean, unless you're
but
paying
not
me
in
like,
the air.
You test this plane, that's $3 million pay.
And if I die, my family gets $12 million each.
Right.
Point blank. Period.
Maybe.
Bring in Maggie. Maggie could negotiate
keep
that.
the word test and airplane out of my vicinity.
Out of my fucking mouth.
Because that's crazy.
Yeah. So he gets really injured on this. And to lift his spirits, he and Georgiana decide that they're going to purchase an 81-foot yawl called the Valiant with their settlement money. And they just sailed around the Gulf Coast while he recovered with his son. And once he was healed, Harvey was then transferred once again to the Edwards Air Force Base in California as a special assistant to the commander of the 6,515th Maintenance Group. And he's pissed about this because it was not a flying assignment.
Oh.
So he had to like keep his pilot's license up on his own. But yeah, not a good thing.
I'm confused, I think.
Yeah, go ahead and ask.
Why would he, what do you mean keep his pilot's?
So like in order to have your pilot's license, you have to like renew it and you have to like have so many flying hours per year. So like.
But even within the Air Force?
Even within the Air Force.
They don't renew it even when you're...
If you're not on a flying assignment, they're not going to renew it.
Okay.
Which means that they're not going to fund you to go on any flights.
Okay.
So he basically was not allowed in the air, which is what he loves doing. So he's fucking pissed.
Yeah.
But it was because he was injured. So...
From their test plane.
From the test plane. From the military. Yeah. However, he did get an opportunity in early 1958 to go on a flight as like a trainer with a newer co-pilot on a T-33 trainer, which is like widely known. I even knew this because Logan talks about it all the time, but still I even knew this. A T-33 is known to be like one of the most easiest and reliable planes out there. It's what they train people. It's called a fucking trainer.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like a tricycle. And somehow, while doing this test flight, just like in Pensacola, the T-33 engine fails, forcing both Harvey and his new co-pilot to bail out. Unfortunately, though, it was anything but a routine bailout because the canopy would not detach. So like in these planes, when it's like these little jets like this, there's someone in the back who's training you, your co-pilot, and then, or anyways, two people. I don't know who's in what seat.
Mm-hmm. Someone's training, someone's
training, someone's learning. So on those, you know how they like lower the thing like it's a convertible? They'll get fucking stuck and not eject. And I'll be like, can't eject, can't eject, can't eject. So then you're going down with the plane.
Like on Top Maverick.
Top Gun. Exactly. Like Top Gun, the original.
Thank God I just watched it the other day for the 19th time.
Yeah, Goose. Oh, fuck.
So
sad.
This is really interesting that this man... so far has had 3
massive things happen in his life.
Massive things happen in his life where he has to abort.
Yeah, exactly. But he's an ejection specialist.
Yeah, clearly.
Right.
He's got the...
Yeah. So the canopy will not open. Therefore, Harvey has to try and restart the engines enough so that way it maybe will pop open. And then when he can't do that, he has to maintain control of the aircraft because they were at a dangerously low altitude. They were about to fucking crash. He then forces his co-pilot to eject through the plexiglass canopy, which would shatter it from the inside out with their body. It's really dangerous, but they're made to do this. Like they're engineered to be able to shatter and not kill you. Mm-hmm. But it's...
gonna hurt.
It's a 50-50 shot, basically.
You know me. You know us. We would smack off of it and fall back down. Be like, well, we're dead.
Yeah. Exactly.
It would not
go well for us. But we would also be so panicked. We would open it ourselves maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even worry about
They don't have a manual opening?
I guess not. But here's the thing. We wouldn't be, I'm like, you're not busting that with your head. We would shatter it with something. Like, we don't have any of those seatbelt window shatterers in here.
Yeah, they don't have any of that.
That they can just and let it and then take them up. Because once that thing's open, it tells you get the fuck out. You're gone. So anyways, Harvey is having to like gain control of this fucking plane as it's going down. They're super low, about to crash. He forces the co-pilot to break the glass with his body and eject. And then the co-pilot thankfully makes it out safely. Harvey keeps the plane in control and waits for the co-pilot to get his parachute drawn so he can make sure he's out of the range of him. And then he ejects himself. Unlike the co-pilot though, Harvey was very seriously injured because he landed on a fucking piece of farm equipment because they were so low that he didn't have the like real resistance that he needed when the parachute. The plane or
his body?
His body. So like the parachute went, but they were so low that it didn't like make it to where he could control it and like kind of have not that you can control ejection parachutes very well,
but they slow you down when you eject from a
so
higher
you can
altitude.
Maybe wiggle your way in a certain place, but because they were so low, he basically just kind of like, it gave him the resistance to not kill him, but he lands on a piece of farming equipment, seriously injured. When the military officials rush to him with the ambulance, they find him screaming hysterically, saying, "I'm fucking sick of this," losing his mind, having an anxiety attack. He develops these tremors and shakes and stuff that he had hid from the military after that crash in the James River when the ejection went wrong there. He developed severe anxiety and like paranoia. And so when they got there, he was like losing it.
It's got PTSD.
So they realize it and they're like, okay, we understand what's going on now. He was medically discharged from the Air Force with the permanent rank of major in 1958 with tons and tons of decorations on him. Like very great military career. So after getting discharged from the military, he and his wife and son Lance go to Miami. They move to Miami. They spend several months there enjoying their boat, the Valiant, but in June of 1958, Harvey divorces Georgiana. There was differing reports on like what was cited, so I'm not even gonna say it. We can all just assume that he was not okay after that and she was not okay after that. So during their divorce proceedings, had to go clear his head, having a hard time. Harvey takes the Valiant out in the Gulf, just enjoying his time. It catches fire and sinks. He's picked up by a passing boat, taken back to shore. 1959, Julian and Georgiana's divorce is finalized and he and his son move to Fort Lauderdale where they settle down. He becomes a regular at all the local marinas and yacht clubs. He always had a gorgeous woman on his arm and was chatting it up with the other men, telling all of his like crazy heroic survival stories and flights from the war. And he eventually was able to save up and purchase his own 70-foot schooner, which was called the White Swan. Harvey then would sail the White Swan from Miami to the Bahamas several times a year with his son when he owned it. However, after 1 year, he sold the White Swan to work as a deckhand on the four-masted windjammer, the Polynesia. And this only fueled his fire to want to be a sailing yacht master. So upon his return to port with the Polynesia, he immediately signed on to be a charter skipper, which is how he started sailing on the Bluebelle in the summer of 1961.
What a life.
Now, respecting his wishes, Julian Harvey's family and friends buried him at sea in the following days after his death. And it was like a pretty quick turnaround. And he also like had the whole military send off and a very big thing. And it was a gorgeous celebration of life where they felt that this strong war hero of a man deserved to be laid to rest in the place that he loved. But as they're doing this, investigators are anxiously waiting for Terry Jo to be prepared to share her story. By Sunday, November 19th, 3 days after her rescue, he had already been buried at sea at this point. Terry Jo was able to sit up and eat a regular diet once again. However, she was still not speaking of what happened. She was talking, but not bringing up anything that had happened. That is until November 20th, the next day, when she told her doctor that had been by her side since the second she was put in the helicopter off of the Captain Theo, that she was ready to speak. And by the way, guys, his name was Dr. Franklin Verdon, and he was a literal angel. Like, I could cry. Like,
Aww.
a literal angel on earth for what he did to protect her, to advocate for her, to help her, to make sure that the investigators weren't being anywhere fucking near her until she was ready, not pushing any information on her. Like, really, like, she before she started speaking again, she would leave a note if she was asleep for him, and it said, if you come in here, wake me up, I want to see you, because like that was her safe person.
Oh,
God,
that's sweet.
Yeah,
you don't come by many of those nowadays.
Nope. He never once left her side. He notified the Coast Guard investigators that Terry Jo was ready to speak, and they arrived at the hospital to see her sitting propped up on pillows, hugging her doll that the crew from the Captain Theo had sent to her, and she was surrounded by hundreds of flowers that had been sent to her, as well as her father's brother, Uncle Fred, and then her father's sister, Aunt Dottie. Captain Barber and Lieutenant Murdoch of the Coast Guard entered the room, made sure that Terry Jo was ready and felt comfortable enough with them to trust them to tell the story before pressing record and allowing Terry Jo to take the stage, telling her story for the very first time. And she did so in the most strong, matter-of-fact way possible, explaining every single detail that she could remember. And this is what she said. Side note, this is all sourced from her book, Alone, Orphaned on the Ocean. Before we get into this, guys, I want to give you a warning, I guess a trigger warning, that this is in detail her account of everything that happened, and she's an 11-year-old girl. I mean, and it's sad. It's really hard. So just make sure you're prepared when moving forward and listening to this piece. It was 9 p.m. on November 12th, 1961. The Harveys and the Duperraults had just finished dinner and sat out on the deck for a nightcap and some stargazing. But Terry Jo was feeling super tired, so she said goodnight to her parents and siblings and retired down into the small cabin where she and her little sister Renee had been sleeping on this trip, just off the main cabin where Arthur and Jean, her parents, and her older brother Brian would sleep. She dozes off. Sometime after she had fallen into this deep sleep, she is awoken by a loud thud, and then stomping, and then stamping, and then a scream from her big brother Brian that sent chills down her spine. Help, Daddy, help. And then silence. Shivering in fear and essentially being too terrified to move, Terry Jo sat there for a few more minutes just listening. But there was nothing more than the typical wind and the creaks of the boat. She then built up the courage to leave the safety of her room and go searching for her family. Terry Jo walked out of the small cabin door into the main cabin, immediately laying her eyes on her mother, 38-year-old Jean, and her brother, 14-year-old Brian. They were crumpled on the floor in pools of blood, very obviously dead. Yet somehow she conjured up the courage to continue on in a dreamlike, detached state. She slowly climbed the stairs, poking her head up through the hatch on the deck. The first thing she saw was more blood. This time it was pooled on the starboard side of the cockpit, and lying in it was a knife. She stood upright and looked towards the bow or the front of the boat, and the first thing that she saw was Julian Harvey charging at her, pouring something from possibly a gas can on the deck. He rushes up to her, strikes her in the face, and violently shoves her down the stairs, growling at her to get back down there. Terry Jo was so confused and terrified. Why would this nice man that everyone loved hit me in my face? What was happening? Where's Dad? Where's Renee? The only thing that she could think was that Harvey was trying to protect her from something that's on the front of the ship. So she listened to him. She covered her eyes so that she wouldn't have to look at her brother and mother's bodies as she ran back into her room. She crawled into her bed, covered up with the blankets over her head, and put her back against the wall, staring towards the door. She put the blankets down because within minutes, Terry Jo heard something. It was the sound of water filling the cabin, sloshing around on the floor, and it smelled like oil. She wondered to herself if Captain Harvey was just cleaning the deck with chemicals to get the blood off, but seconds later, a dark silhouette of a man appeared in her doorway, carrying what looked to be a rifle. It was Julian Harvey. And that wasn't just any rifle he was carrying. It was her brother Brian's that he had brought along with them to hunt for sharks. In fear, she just stared at him in the darkness, and he stared back at her, breathing heavily as the water rose up his legs. He then just simply turned away and walked up the stairs. She could hear him climbing the stairs and get onto the upper deck, followed by this erratic pounding noise from somewhere else on the boat. But within minutes, Terry Jo was forced to leave the safety of her cabin once again, as the water was now covering her bunked mattress. Slowly and quietly, she got down into the water and waded through the oily, waist-deep water all the way to the stairs, terrified that she would accidentally bump into the bodies of her mother and brother that were floating near her. She climbed the stairs and carefully peeked her head above, terrified that he would shove her down and hit her once again. Terry Jo could see that the mizzen light, which is what's on top of the mast, was illuminating the Bluebelle's dinghies. They had been lowered and were now floating alongside the ship's port, or the left side. Registering what this meant, she jumped up and yelled out, asking if the boat was sinking. And from the front of the boat, which was behind her at this point because she was facing the stern, she heard Harvey shout, "Yes!" He then rushed towards her, handing her a rope and screamed, "Hold this!" In her shock, Terry Jo grabs the rope and watches as Harvey disappears to go get something from the other side of the deck. Seconds later, this super large swell rips the rope out of Terry Jo's hands, which is when she realized that it was connected to the dinghy and the life raft. About this time, Harvey came running back to Terry Jo, shouting, "The dinghy is gone," as they watched it float into the darkness. Without hesitation, Harvey dove into the water and swam to the dinghy, leaving Terry Jo behind on the sinking Bluebelle. She watched as he swam out into the darkness after the dinghy and then disappeared. Like a reflex, an image of the oblong cork float flashed into Terry Jo's mind as the water was now rising rapidly, swallowing her and the Bluebelle. She ran to the other side of the boat where it was tied to the wall, and as if she had been untying knots her entire life, she quickly and efficiently untied one of the ropes, freeing one side of the cork float. However, the other side was giving her a lot more trouble. As she struggles with the second rope, the deck slips below her feet and she's now treading in the water, hanging onto the float for dear life as it begins pulling her under with the Bluebelle. Even while under the water, Terry Jo continues to try and free the float, and within seconds, somehow she freed it and was launched to the surface with the float leading her to the air. And as she went up, the Bluebelle sank below her, downward into the abyss, which was still in perfect condition from what she could tell. No broken mast, no fire, no squall. So Terry Jo was back to the surface, and she just laid flat, silently in fear, as she scanned around her in the darkness, praying that she would see or hear her sister or father, or honestly, just anyone, even Harvey. But she was alone. A small shower of rain fell as she shivered on the cold float uncontrollably because it's freezing out there on the ocean at night. The next morning, the sun rose and began to burn Terry Jo's skin, face, body, and lips, scorching her with no protection at all. By that evening, the float began to disintegrate as it is not meant to be used for more than a day or two. It was now exposing her feet and legs into the water where parrotfish nipped at her feet. She was incredibly dehydrated with her tongue, lips, and throat completely dry. And then night fell. Once again, it was freezing in the darkness, and Terry Jo just sat alone in the open ocean. The next morning, the sun rose again and continued to burn her entire body and dehydrate her. But she had a glimmer of hope when a small red plane began circling overhead. She took off her white blouse and began waving at it frantically for what felt like an hour. It continually just circled above and even dove in her direction twice. However, at the angle that she was, and because of the color of her hair and the float and the light color of her clothes, all being blonde, white, and pale pink, she was invisible to them. She only looked like a white cap from above. And hours later, she spotted things floating towards her, just beneath the water's surface. Terrified, she braced herself as they swam closer. And then they popped their heads above the water, making direct eye contact with the 11-year-old girl. They were porpoises, or as I lovingly called them when I was little, fathead dolphins. And they just looked at her. They swam around her, keeping her company for hours.
Wow.
And then they swam away. When they were gone, Terry Jo said a prayer to God and thanked him for sending them to be with her. That night, Terry Jo was cold, but was thankful for the first break of sun. It was incredibly dark, and unknown to Terry Jo, her kidneys had began to shut down. From the exhaustion, trauma, dehydration, starvation, and fear, then Terry Jo began to hallucinate. The first one she saw was of her father. He He was drinking a wine glass with red wine in it and sitting in an airplane, gesturing to her to approach him while saying, "Come on, Terry Joe, we're leaving." Wednesday came, and once again, Terry Joe blistered in the sun, now hallucinating islands and palm trees with waterfalls, and they would disappear. She was going in and out of consciousness. By Thursday morning, Terry Joe was on the brink of death, no longer trusting her own eyes and ears, too weak to move or even open her eyes. Until the mid-morning, when she was awoken by a great wall of darkness just covering her in the float. Confused, she began waking herself slowly, preparing her eyes to open. She could hear something. They were faint voices. She slowly forced her eyes open, and she saw above her the Captain Theo, with the crew members frantically waving her down. And with what little strength that she had left, Terry Joe lifted up her arms slowly and just waved them as she watched the boat drop into the water and begin rushing towards her. And then she doesn't remember anything else.
Holy crap.
She woke up days later with Dr. Vernon by her side in the Miami hospital, knowing that her mother and brother were dead, but internally questioning, never out loud, if her father and sister would be walking into that hospital room at any moment. And I want to take this time to tell you guys about the beautiful Dupperault family before we continue with Terry Joe's survival story. So Arthur Duperrault was born in Green Bay, Wisconsin on March 7th, 1921, and he graduated from Green Bay West High School in 1939 with a reputation of being a successful leader and a debate champion.
All right.
He then attended Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin, and he was pre-med or pharmacy, I believe, one of the two, but decided to drop out and join the Navy in 1939 with World War II taking place and not wanting to be drafted. Arthur was only 5'8" with a really scrawny physique. That's what the report said, not me. At the time, therefore, the Navy would not accept him until he gained some muscle. So he hit the gym and was accepted a few months later. Following basic training, Arthur was sent to the Far East as a medic on the Burma Road. During his time with the Navy at war, he spent countless hours on the ocean during transport, falling in love with travel and the education values that it has, especially when done on the ocean, where you can fully grasp the depth and the size of our world. After 20 months in the Far East, Duperrault was transferred to the U.S., where he worked in Washington, D.C. for a short time before volunteering to go to China as a medic in February of 1943. That next year, he was assigned to the Pentagon for duties, where he met the, quote, dark-haired, vivacious Jean Broche of Madison, Wisconsin, end quote, and that was by Terry Joe herself, about her mama. She worked as a secretary for the FBI headquarters.
Queen.
Okay, Queen. And the two of them fell in love instantly. And I mean instantly, because like they got married a month and a half later in December of 1944.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So.
When you know, you know.
When you know, you know. In November of 1945, Arthur was discharged from the Navy, so him and Jean returned to his home in Wisconsin, and Arthur began commuting to Northern Illinois College of Optometry during the week for classes, and then would visit Jean and their firstborn child, Brian, who was born in 1947, on the weekends, which was hard but manageable and was what needed to be done to be able to have the family and the life that he wanted. Arthur graduated in 1949 and immediately began working incredibly hard to gain a great reputation and gift his family with financial security. Dr. Arthur Duperrault became one of the best and most regarded optometrists in the area, and that is by the accounts of not only his community, but many, many peers. He soon became a leader in the Wisconsin Optometry Association and was one of the very first in the area to take the leap and begin selling one of the more recent products at the time, contact lens.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't know if this is like, because like a contact, you'd say a contact lens for one, but
lenses.
Go get my lenses? Or is that
Have you
Southern?
seen my contact lenses?
Because I've always said, where are my contact lenses? But is that like Wasper?
Contact lenses. You know, lenses.
I guess contact lenses. Which apparently a lot of optometrists at the time thought was like a fucking scam or like a fad. They're like, really? Oh, yeah, we don't know if this is gonna stick. Yeah.
That's interesting.
The Duperraults were loved and cherished by their community, but especially Miss Jean Duperrault. She was the most amazing mother, wife, and friend. Jean was absolutely stunning. She was intelligent. She was capable, well-traveled, kind, creative, and welcoming to every person that she ever met. She knew how to sew stitches, so anytime her children got hurt, they would just go to her, and so would all the neighborhood kids. And she was not afraid to risk her life for a very sick neighborhood child who needed to go to the hospital during a really bad blizzard, and their parents couldn't drive them. She loved art and covered her home in treasures from all around the world that she had studied and taught her children about, wanting them to understand the vast and diverse world that we live in. Also, so iconic. This was like unheard of for people in the 50s, especially when, look at it, for not edit, but scratch that, for women in the 50s. She had this like little group of besties, and the husbands would stay home for a week and let them go on like big vacations everywhere, and they would go travel by themselves. Like she was
unheard of.
Fucking iconic.
Yeah.
Iconic.
It's a good man.
And so he's a good man. Exactly. The Duperraults hosted large dinner parties where they would serve international dishes that these small town Wisconsiners had never heard of in their lives. And they were just way ahead of their time with not only all the things, but like I said, these gender stereotypes that were typical in the 50s. In fact, the reason that Arthur started saving up his money for this cruise to take them and show them the world was because he wanted his children and his wife to have the same gift of being able to see the world like he did during his travels and educate them and educate themselves by traveling. And the reason he decided to do it in November of 1961 was because he felt like his kids were growing up too fast and he was missing this like very precious time with his family. So he found, trained, and paid another optometrist to take over his practice for 4 months, packs up his entire family's life, drives them down to Florida so they could do a test run by just going on a week in the Bahamas on a ketch that they had chartered called the Bluebelle.
Damn.
Like, for him to be like, what? Imagine in the 50s.
I know.
Dads weren't like this. Husbands weren't like this.
And the most tragic ending ever to a trip of a lifetime.
Yeah. It was going to be the test. They were going to do that, and then they were going to charter a big one, and they were going to go on a international one for months. He trained and like prepared and was taking time off. He'd saved up, and by no means, let me make this clear, they were not rich. They were not wealthy. They were upper middle class, but since the time that Brian was born, he saved up for this trip.
Yeah. Fuck.
Yeah. After hearing Terry Jo's story, Captain Barber and Lieutenant Murdoch had to take a breath. It was horrifying to hear the truth from the mouth of such a young little girl. It was her survival story, and she had trusted them with it. But with Harvey being dead, and the only thing that they have left being the accounts of those who knew him, they were left with only one theory. Julian Harvey had lots and lots of debt. And just after their wedding, not long before the final voyage of the Bluebelle, he had taken out a $20,000 life insurance policy on his wife, Mary Dean Harvey, which just so happened to have a double indemnity clause on it, meaning that he would get paid twice the amount of the policy if his wife's death was the result of an accident instead of a health complication or medical complication. Therefore, what Julian Harvey was really after was Mary Dean Harvey's payout to pay off all of the debt that he had accumulated. So maybe that night, he tries to stage her quote-unquote accidental death with witnesses being on board, being on deck, just on the other side to give him an alibi. Something in his plan goes wrong, and maybe Arthur or Brian or someone catches him in the act. Realizing that he's been caught, he begins killing all of the witnesses. But for some reason, he decides to not kill the little girls himself, with Renee's cause of death officially being determined to be drowning. Now, granted, he could have done that, but then why not kill Terry Jo?
Right.
As well? I don't know if that's what he did. But this theory is heavily supported by what his 4 out of 6 surviving ex-wives told investigators, which is that he was incredibly abusive and continually got more and more out of control during his time in the military, which was also supported by his military record showing that there was a lot of concern about Julian Harvey starting from his time in Korea. And higher-ups had even checked on him several times and had him assessed to be sure that he was mentally capable to continue serving, yet he denied having any issues, anything internally, anything mentally. When they tested him, he seemed fine. He said he didn't need a break, and then he would clean up his act and be normal for a temporary period of time, but that period of time would get shorter and shorter and shorter with every time. As for his friends and family, they also knew that he was becoming more and more out of control, with many of them also coming forward to investigators with secrets and speculation that they had about Harvey's life and had kept hidden for years. And many of these people, and now investigators, believe that he lied about many of the engine troubles that he faced in the military, that he probably caused on purpose some of these crashes when he was in the military, sunk his own boats, specifically that one at that shipwreck, not once but twice, and that was confirmed because he did admit this to close friends. He did it for the insurance money. And lastly, even from the beginning of local investigations years and years prior, there was evidence and plenty enough reason to believe that Julian Harvey purposely ran his car into that bayou off that bridge with his wife and his mother-in-law inside, which is how he was able to react fast enough to save his own life. Plus, there was enough evidence that would support that he would have had enough time for him to save them if he really did get out during the fall because the windows were rolled up. So how'd you get out?
Right.
And also, if the windows are rolled up, it takes a lot longer for it to sink. So
I feel like he just snapped.
Yeah.
I feel like you're right. I think they're right.
Yeah.
That he was going after the insurance money and he was caught red-handed. And
I think it was like an addiction for him.
Yes, me too.
Like a thrill.
Right.
You know?
Like these big disastrous moments.
Yeah, it's like an adrenaline rush. It's like a daredevil, but now he's taking people's lives with him. So, and this was that little portion I just told you about the windows being rolled up and all that stuff. That was based off of a reenactment that was done by an investigative team of professional divers.
Wow.
Right. And because of that, he was more than capable of killing not only Mary Dean Harvey. Well, it shows that he was more than enough capable of not only killing Mary Dean Harvey, but the Duperraults. However, I am not sure why he wouldn't have killed Terry Jo and Renee, if he did or if he didn't. So I almost believe that he might have found Renee's body. Like maybe he purposefully didn't want to kill the girls and was going to just let them drown. So it'd be like,
and they were sleeping. So they didn't know what was going on.
Right. Well, we have no idea where Renee was. She had stayed up with her parents that night to stargaze. So we have no idea. But like my thinking is maybe he just like put the life vest on her and sent her off in the water.
Yeah, and then came back
and then expected that Terry Jo would sink with the Bluebelle.
It's fucking terrible.
It's fucking awful. It's fucking awful. But maybe when he found it, and I think I said this last episode, was that maybe when he found her floating, he was like, it wouldn't be a bad idea for me to have proof of something I didn't do.
Right.
Which is cause her death in a direct manner. But again, this is just a theory. It's what investigators theorize. It's what majority of people that have ever examined this case theorize. Of course, though, nobody really knows why. No matter what, though, based off of the several conflicting accounts that Julian Harvey gave investigators, friends, and others, plus what little evidence they were able to conjure up based off of Terry Jo's account, Renee's autopsy, which was confirmed to be drowning, and the dinghy he was rescued in with all the supplies in it, they knew that Julian Harvey was guilty of sinking the Bluebelle, therefore guilty of taking the lives of, and they're not going to question what Terry Jo saw. She saw what she saw.
Right.
Because of these horrific tragedies that took place on the Bluebelle, the Coast Guard changed several regulations, making life rafts and all emergency vests, supplies, etc. be orange, bright orange, neon orange, and yellow. And as for Terry Jo, she returned to Green Bay to live with her father's sister, Aunt Dottie, and her 3 cousins. And when she was 12 years old, she decided to change her name to Terry, and it's spelled T-E-R-E, in order to escape the stigma of being quote-unquote brave little Terry Jo. Terry graduated, went to college, got married, had 3 children, and at the time her book was written, she had 3 grandchildren, and hopes that, quote, if one person heals from a life tragedy after reading my story, my journey will have been worth it.
Wow.
I would go into more detail about Terry's amazing, gorgeous life that she writes in detail about, but I would hate to take any more words from her. So I would like you guys to go read her story. It's in the last few chapters of the book she wrote with Dr. Richard Logan. And it, like I've been saying this entire time, it's called Alone, Orphaned on the Ocean. But I started to tell you her story based off what I read and my research. And then when I was reading her book and I was reading her work, I was like, I can't take anything else. Like this is enough. I just wanted to share your story. Like, I don't want to have, I just want her to be at peace, and I want her to be able to tell her own story too in her own words like that. Now, I highly suggest you go read it, but I do want to let you guys know there's a bit of controversy about the book itself because she chose to do this willingly, okay? Now, granted, that doesn't mean that she couldn't have been persuaded and not been told everything, but either way, the book was written after not only the research was put together and the original accounts and the original reports from the Coast Guard and everything from the original investigation, interviews with all these people, but also because Dr. Richard Logan, he was like a psychiatrist or a psychologist, I'm not really sure, maybe forensic psychologist, and he administered her the drug that is often referred to as truth serum, which she wanted to do in order to try and get all the details because she has always felt like there's something she's missing in the details. And basically what this drug do is it kind of like hypnotizes you in a way, and it's called a truth serum, and you basically, it allows your frontal lobe to not block, certain details out of trauma. So the things that you forget, and you can say it all.
Wow.
And so
I didn't know. I mean, I did know that truth serum was
a
real,
thing, yeah.
But I've never heard it like actually being used.
So she did it, and they do list in there like developments that were made from her doing this. So.
Wow. I just can't. I mean, I made Taylar tell me what happened at the end. That after we recorded the first half, I was like, you're not making me wait.
I can't wait.
You can make everyone else wait, but you're not making me wait. And we were just talking about how spiritual her encounters were while being stranded in the middle of the ocean.
The
porpoises,
fat dolphin heads. Yeah, those guys.
I wonder how many there were.
I think, I read somewhere that said 2. In the book, I only found it just say porpoises. And then I read in another place that it said 3, which was interesting to me. Because that would be
mom, dad, brother.
Is that?
Wow. What a sad fucking story.
Yeah.
Terrible. But I didn't. So this story is the reason life vests are the way they are.
Yep. And every raft that's on a boat, none of it can be white. It all has to be a bright color. So if you want it to be aesthetic and match your yacht, too fucking bad.
Yeah.
Too fucking bad. There's too many there's people like Julian Harvey out there. We can't.
Yeah.
So if you want
he just fucking
have fucking beef with anyone, you can have beef with that dude. Maniac.
I wonder how he sunk the boat. They haven't been able to recover it. You said it was in like
it's gone. It's in
the trench.
It's in the Northwest Providence Channel and in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah.
Nowhere. So that's the case.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
I apologize, but I'm really glad to do. I mean, this is like one of the first cases in a really long while where I was like burning for it. You know what I mean? Like burning inside about it, wanting to get it out so fast. I read that book. I can't read. I can't weed.
I don't know how.
I don't know how to weed. So I read that whole thing in a lot. I read it fast.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. I was proud of myself, but
that was great.
I really recommend you guys to go read her story in her words. Great.
Is there a movie?
Maybe. I don't know. I didn't look that up. I was supposed to look that up.
I swear there was a movie.
Let's look it up. Literature, television. She appeared on an episode of the Oprah Winfrey Show in 1988. And in this show, she was reunited with Captain Stylianos C, who was the captain of the Greek freighter, the Captain Theo, who rescued her.
TV?
On fucking Oprah. That didn't show up on the YouTube history. Where the fuck was that?
Oh no.
We gotta find that. And then she was on the morning television show, she was on the Today Show in 2010 when she released her book to be interviewed about the release of her book. And went out on May 6th.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fucking Oprah.
And she also another thing is that I believe that she does speak out a lot about survivor's guilt. So I'm telling you guys, like, I could do a 7-part series, but like it got to the point where I was like, I can't take anything more from her.
Yeah.
Like I feel like spiritually not right doing that, morally not right. So we're not.
Yeah. Read a book.
Watch
Oprah.
Go. Yeah, I'm about to pull up Oprah. I want to see that interview. Okay. Love you guys. I hope you enjoy this. Happy birthday to fucking me.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Raven.
Happy birthday, Raven. All right, love you. Bye.